I don't think she needs it, Emily said, cutting her salmon with surgical precision. She's always been resourceful. The silence stretched across our family's anniversary dinner table like a held breath. 12 relatives watched as Mom nodded slowly, her wedding ring catching the restaurant's soft light. Dad cleared his throat and pushed the thick envelope toward my younger sister. That's what we agreed on, he said, voice steady as granite. We told Emily she could decide who got the college fund. Emily's smile bloomed wide and victorious. And I chose me. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored, expensive. I caught a glimpse of the check's corner before she tucked it into her designer purse without even glancing my way. $25,000. 4 years of tuition, my future decided by someone who'd never worked a day for it. Conversations resumed around us like water flowing around stones. Aunt Clara complimented Emily's dress. Uncle Mark asked about her semester abroad plans. Not one person made eye contact with me. I sat perfectly still, fork balanced in my fingers, watching my family celebrate my erasure with champagne and forced laughter. I didn't say a word. The silence felt heavy in my throat, but I swallowed it down like I'd learned to do since childhood. I placed my fork beside my untouched plate with deliberate care. The small clink of metal against porcelain seemed impossibly loud. I stood up slowly, smoothing my skirt. Slid my chair back under the table with practiced politeness. "Excuse me," I said quietly, the words barely audible above the dinner conversation that had already moved past my existence. Then I walked out of Romano's restaurant, my heels clicking steadily across the marble floor. The hostess smiled as I passed. The evening air hit my face like a gentle slap, cool and honest. Behind me, someone made a joke about how I'd be fine. "She always figures it out," Dad's voice drifted through the closing door. Laughter followed, light and careless. I kept walking to my car, each step feeling like shedding invisible chains. My hands didn't shake as I unlocked the door. My eyes stayed dry. I never looked back at those warm restaurant windows. Never saw Emily counting her windfall or my parents toasting their perfect daughter's bright future. My name is Lena Carlson, and my parents let my sister decide who got support. I accepted their choice and planned accordingly. It's funny how a single moment can crystallize years of quiet hurt into perfect, sharp focus. That dinner wasn't the beginning of anything new. It was simply confirmation of what I'd always suspected but never wanted to believe. That in my family's eyes, I was the reliable workhorse, not the prized thoroughbred. Emily was 20, golden-haired, and charming in the effortless way that made adults lean closer when she spoke. She collected admirers like other people collected stamps. I was 22, dark-haired, and useful in the quiet way that made people forget I was in the room until they needed something fixed. The college fund had been established when I was born. $25,000, carefully saved over 2 decades. I'd assumed it was mine by birthright, by age, by simple fairness. But fairness, I was learning, was a luxury my family couldn't afford to give me. They needed Emily to shine, and someone had to pay for the spotlight. That someone had always been me. Emily was always the sun in our family's universe, bright and blinding, pulling every conversation, every photo, every moment of pride into her orbit. She got the dance lessons, the art camps, the designer clothes for special occasions. Her bedroom walls were covered with ribbons from competitions I'd driven her to, trophies I'd helped polish, certificates I'd watched her receive from audiences that never included me. I got the responsibility. The quiet expectation that I'd handle whatever needed handling. When Emily forgot her lunch, I made sure she had money. When she needed help with homework, I stayed up explaining algebra while she painted her nails. When she wanted to try violin, I worked extra shifts at the local diner to help cover lessons. They said I was the strong one, the mature one, the daughter who could handle anything. Which meant, of course, that I got less attention, less celebration, less consideration when big decisions were made. But I was reliable. And in our house, reliability was its own kind of prison. Emily sparkled, I functioned, and somehow that had become enough for everyone except me. Love in our house came with conditions and fine print written in invisible ink. When Emily brought home a B+, Mom bought her a celebration dinner and called 3 relatives to share the news. When I brought home straight A's while working 20 hours a week at Murphy's Diner, they said, That's what we expect from you, sweetheart. The difference was subtle but consistent. Emily's achievements were gifts to the family. Mine were obligations fulfilled. Physical affection followed the same unspoken rules. Emily got spontaneous hugs, hair ruffling, proud arms around shoulders during family photos. I got brief pats on the back when I did something particularly helpful. They didn't hug me when I was sad. They didn't celebrate my victories, but they always needed me. When Mom had her gallbladder surgery last spring, I was the one sleeping in the hospital chair, managing her medications, coordinating with doctors. When Emily had her heart broken by Brandon Miller, I was the one holding her while she sobbed, making midnight ice cream runs, listening to the same story 47 times. I helped with tax returns, cooked Thanksgiving dinner, covered Dad's car payment when his hours got cut at the factory. They told people I was so selfless. But I was learning that selfless was just another word for invisible. I didn't ask for much, which made it easier for them not to offer. My requests were always practical. Gas money for driving Emily to auditions, help with textbook costs, a new laptop when mine died during finals week. The answers were always variations of the same theme. Money's tight right now, or you understand our situation, or you're so good at making do. Meanwhile, Emily's requests sailed through without question. Spring break trips with friends, concert tickets, a car for her 16th birthday because she's starting to drive herself places. I walked to work, walked to school, walked everywhere until I saved enough to buy my grandmother's old Honda with its cracked windshield and temperamental transmission. They called my patience humility, my silence maturity, my acceptance wisdom. But really, they just didn't want to see me clearly. Because if they saw me truly, honestly, completely, they'd have to admit what they were doing. They'd have to acknowledge that their golden child's shine came from the light they refused to give their other daughter. And that would shatter their perfect family narrative. The first crack in their story came a week after the dinner, when I overheard Dad on the phone with his brother. Lena didn't want the money, he was saying, voice carrying down the hallway. She said Emily needed it more. She's always been selfless like that. I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. Coffee mug halfway to my lips. Too proud to take help, he continued. You know how she is, independent to a fault. They were rewriting history in real time, turning my exclusion into my choice, making Emily's selfishness into my nobility. When I confronted Emily later, she was lounging on her bed, painting her nails the color of ripe cherries. I heard Dad's version of what happened, I said carefully. She didn't look up. It's easier if they think that. She blew on her nails, completely unbothered. Besides, you would have just saved it anyway. I'm actually using it. The casual cruelty hit me like cold water. Not malicious, just thoughtless. I was a problem solved, a story simplified, a witness to be managed. I left her room without another word, understanding finally that my family's version of love required my erasure. What they didn't know was that I'd been building something of my own in the spaces between their expectations. It started small. A neighbor needed help designing a baby shower invitation. Another wanted a simple website for her pottery business. Word spread quietly through the network of people who actually saw me working. Late nights after homework. Weekend hours when Emily was at parties. The quiet moments when my family assumed I was just doing computer stuff, instead of building a legitimate freelance design business. I didn't talk about the clients, the contracts, the steady stream of projects that had grown from $20 favors into real professional work. They never asked what I was doing during those long stretches at my laptop. They assumed silence meant nothing important was happening. But while Emily was planning how to spend money she hadn't earned, I was earning money they didn't know existed. The irony was perfect. They thought I needed their scraps while I was building my own table. And they were so busy watching Emily's performance, they missed my quiet revolution completely. 6 months after the dinner, Dad called me at work. Honey, we need to talk about Emily's study abroad program, he said without preamble. The costs are higher than we expected. I balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder, continuing to edit the marketing materials spread across my desk. What costs? Housing, travel, the cultural immersion activities. We're looking at another $8,000. His voice carried that familiar tone of patient explanation, like he was teaching me basic math. "We were hoping you could help with a small loan." "Small loan? $8,000. She's representing our family over there, Lena. You understand how important this is." The entitlement was breathtaking. They'd given Emily my college fund, and now they wanted me to finance her European adventure. "Dad," I said slowly, "Emily got $25,000 6 months ago. What happened to that?" "Well, tuition, room and board, books, you know how expensive education is, and now you want me to cover her entertainment budget." A pause, then his voice sharpened. "Lena, be reasonable." I hung up. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and made a list. Not of revenge, not yet. Just boundaries. Every shared account where my name appeared as backup. Every informal agreement where I'd promised to help if needed. Every way my financial life had become tangled with theirs through years of small emergencies and casual obligations. Step by step, I began disentangling myself. Quietly, legally, completely. I called the bank and removed my name from the emergency contact list for their accounts. Changed my address on shared documents. Redirected mail that still came to their house. No announcements. No dramatic confrontations. No explanations that would give them a chance to argue or manipulate. Just distance, measured in paperwork and policy changes. By the time they noticed, it would be too late to undo. I was learning that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply step back and let people carry their own weight. Or in my family's case, let them discover how much weight I'd been carrying all along. I didn't show up for Christmas. For the first time in 22 years, I sent a card instead of my presents. Simple white cardstock with season's greetings in elegant script. No gift. No long letter explaining my absence. No elaborate excuse they could dissect and debate. Just my signature and an empty space where their expectations used to live. The phone calls started Christmas Eve. Mom, voice tight with forced cheer, asking if I was feeling all right. Dad, more direct, wondering if I'd forgotten something important. Emily, genuinely confused, asking if I was being weird on purpose. I listened to the voicemails without responding. Each one revealed more about their assumptions than their concern. They'd taken my presence for granted so completely that my absence felt like betrayal rather than choice. By New Year's Eve, the calls stopped coming. It was the first holiday season where I chose silence not as survival, but as power. Where I discovered that my family's disappointment couldn't actually hurt me unless I let it. I spent Christmas morning in my apartment, drinking coffee and working on a logo design for a restaurant chain. Peaceful, productive, free. Emily's social media told its own story of casual privilege and complete blindness. Her Instagram showed the study abroad program in full color. Cobblestone streets in Prague, café au lait in Paris, sunset photos from a Tuscan vineyard. Every image carefully curated to show the life my college fund had purchased. The captions were masterpieces of deflection. Couldn't have done this without my amazing support system, with heart emojis and gratitude hashtags. Blessed to have family who believe in my dreams. She meant them. Not me. Never me. But the funny thing was, I'd just signed the restaurant chain that owned the cafe in her Paris photos. 3 months of design work for their rebrand project. More money than she'd spent on her entire European adventure. The irony was delicious. While she was spending my inheritance on overpriced wine tours, I was earning real money from the people serving her wine. I screenshot her posts not out of bitterness, but as reminders. Evidence of the life they'd prioritized over mine. Every blessed caption, every grateful hashtag, every family-first philosophy post would age differently when the truth came out. The first real test of my new boundaries came when Mom called crying. Dad had gotten into trouble with the IRS. Something about unreported income from side jobs and penalties that had snowballed into serious money. They needed help navigating the legal paperwork, understanding their options, dealing with the bureaucracy. "You're so good at this complicated stuff," Mom said through tears. "We don't know who else to ask." The old me would have dropped everything. Spent days researching tax law, making phone calls, filling out forms in triplicate. I would have fixed it quietly and efficiently, then disappeared back into the shadows while they pretended the crisis had resolved itself. "I'm not available for that," I said simply. Her crying stopped, The silence stretched long enough for me to hear the exact moment her sadness turned to anger. "After everything we've done for you?" Her voice went cold and sharp. "This is how you repay us?" I almost laughed. Everything they'd done for me, like food and shelter, were magnanimous gifts instead of basic parental obligations. Like I hadn't been earning my keep since I was old enough to hold a dish rag. "I hope you figure it out," I said, and hung up. My cousin Rachel had always been the family messenger, the one who tried to smooth over conflicts and keep everyone connected. So when she forwarded me screenshots from the family group chat, I wasn't entirely surprised. But seeing my family's true opinions in black and white still felt like a punch to the chest. Emily had started the conversation. "Lena's being completely selfish about Dad's tax thing. I can't believe she won't help her own family." Mom's response: "She's always been like this. Cold. Even as a little girl, she never showed proper affection." Dad chimed in: "Some people change when they get a little success. Forget where they came from." Aunt Clara added: "Maybe she needs time to mature. Some children take longer to develop empathy." 23 messages dissecting my character, my motivations, my supposed failures as a daughter and sister. Not one person defended me. Not one suggested that maybe I had good reasons for setting boundaries. I printed every screenshot and put them in a folder labeled evidence. Not for revenge, but for clarity. The next time they tried to gaslight me about our family dynamics, I'd have receipts. The business I'd built in the shadows was growing faster than I'd expected. What started as weekend graphic design projects had evolved into something bigger. A legitimate marketing consultancy with corporate clients, monthly retainers, and a waiting list for new projects. I'd incorporated under the name Meridian Creative Solutions and moved my assets into business accounts they couldn't trace. Hired a lawyer to review contracts, opened a separate checking account that had never been connected to their financial emergencies. The paperwork was clean, professional, completely separate from the family narrative that still saw me as the struggling older sister who needed their charity. Meanwhile, I was quietly removing myself from every shared financial obligation I'd been tricked or guilted into over the years. The co-signature on their second mortgage that I'd signed at 19, not understanding the implications. The shared phone plan where I'd been covering Emily's overage charges for 3 years. The car insurance policy where I was listed as a backup payer. One by one, I canceled or transferred every connection. Each signature removed was another thread cut. They didn't notice immediately because the bills kept getting paid. They assumed I was still quietly covering the gaps. Emily lost her part-time job at the boutique in March. The owner was downsizing, keeping only the most experienced employees. Emily had been hired more for her Instagram presence than her retail skills, and when profits dropped, influence couldn't save her position. She called me, actually crying for the first time since high school. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed into the phone. "I have all these expenses and Mom and Dad are still dealing with the tax thing. I thought you might." I listened to her trail off, waiting for me to volunteer a solution, to offer a loan or suggest a payment plan or simply ask how much she needed. Instead, I said, "I'm sorry to hear that." The silence stretched between us like a held breath. "That's it?" she finally asked. "What else would you like me to say?" I thought maybe you could help, like before. "Before when?" Another pause. She couldn't name a specific time because helping had always been my default, never her expectation that needed to be stated. "I have to go," she said finally. "Good luck with the job search," I replied and hung up. Dad tried a different approach when the second mortgage payment came due. He showed up at my apartment unannounced, holding a manila folder and wearing his most reasonable expression. The same look he'd used when explaining why Emily deserved my college fund. "This family has always supported each other," he said, settling into my living room chair like he belonged there. Through thick and thin. I poured myself coffee but didn't offer him any. "The mortgage situation is temporary," he continued, opening the folder to show me payment schedules and bank statements. "We just need a bridge loan. 6 months, maybe 8. $18,000. Enough to cover the payments they'd missed while dealing with their IRS problems." You've done well for yourself. He gestured around my apartment, taking in the new furniture and artwork I'd bought with my consulting income. This family supported you when you were getting started. Now you can give back. The gaslighting was masterful, reframing my childhood of financial neglect as support, making my success seem like their investment rather than my work. Dad, I said quietly, this family never supported me. His reasonable expression cracked slightly. And I'm not a bank. I sent a formal letter through my lawyer the next week. It was professionally written, legally precise, and emotionally devastating. A complete withdrawal from every financial entanglement I'd been manipulated into over the years. The second mortgage co-signature I'd signed at 19? The lawyer had found grounds for invalidation based on misrepresentation of terms and my age at signing. The document was voided. The shared credit card where I'd been covering minimum payments? My name was removed, and the full balance transferred to their sole responsibility. The emergency contact status that had made me liable for their financial decisions? Revoked through formal notice. Every safety net I'd provided without realizing it was being pulled away in one coordinated motion. The letter gave them 30 days to adjust their financial planning accordingly. When the certified mail receipt came back signed, I felt something inside me settle into place. Not revenge, not cruelty, just boundaries with teeth. Word traveled fast in our small town. By the end of April, people were asking questions. How Emily's study abroad had been financed when the family was clearly struggling with basic expenses. Why I was no longer at family gatherings but seemed to be thriving independently. The perfect family narrative was developing cracks that were hard to explain away. Mrs. Henderson from church mentioned seeing my business featured in the regional newspaper. The bank teller asked Mom why I'd closed our shared accounts so suddenly. Emily's former coworkers wondered aloud why she wasn't getting family help with her job search. The praise that had always flowed toward Emily began to feel conditional, uncertain. People remembered that I'd been quietly competent while she'd been loudly celebrated. They couldn't maintain their golden child mythology without my participation. And I was no longer participating. The social fabric they'd woven around Emily's superiority started unraveling when people realized I'd been holding most of the threads. Emily showed up at my door on a rainy Thursday evening in May. She looked different, smaller. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her Instagram perfect makeup smudged. The confidence she'd always worn like expensive perfume had faded to something desperate and sharp. "I know you hate me," she said before I could speak. "But Mom and Dad are really struggling. Now, the house payment, the lawyers, everything, please." I invited her in and made tea, the same chamomile blend I'd served during her late-night crisis calls in high school. "I don't hate you," I said, handing her the mug. "I just don't owe you anything." She started crying then, not the pretty tears she'd perfected for sympathy, but ugly, honest sobs that shook her whole body. I never realized, she gasped between breaths, "how much you did, how much you carried." "You never had to realize it, that was the point. But they need help. We need help." I sipped my tea and waited. "You made your choice at that dinner table," I said finally. "I'm living with mine." My first solo exhibition opened in June. 3 months of marketing consulting work had funded the gallery rental, the printing, the opening night reception. Corporate clients flew in from 2 states away. Local business owners who'd commissioned work came to see what else I could create. For the first time, my name was publicly attached to my professional success instead of hidden behind other people's projects. I sent my parents an invitation. Simple cream cardstock with elegant typography. No personal message, no explanation, no emotional appeal. Just the facts. Date, time, location, and my name in bold letters as the featured artist. They didn't come. Emily posted about a different art opening that same night. One across town, where she'd been invited as someone's +1. Her Instagram story showed wine glasses and abstract paintings that had nothing to do with her life or interests. The message was clear. They would rather attend a stranger's success than acknowledge mine. I wasn't surprised, but I was finally completely free. 3 weeks later, they asked to meet. The request came through Rachel, who'd been watching our family drama unfold from the safety of neutral territory. Mom had called her, crying about misunderstandings and hurt feelings, and daughters who'd forgotten their responsibilities. They want to explain, Rachel told me over coffee. They think there's been some kind of communication breakdown. I agreed to meet at Sunrise Diner, the same place I'd worked through high school while Emily took drama classes. Public, familiar, impossible to turn into an emotional ambush. They arrived looking older than I remembered. Dad's confidence had developed hairline cracks. Mom's perfect composure seemed held together with willpower and concealer. We sat in a corner booth while they explained their version of events, how they'd never meant to hurt me, how they'd always assumed I understood their choices, how family was supposed to forgive and move forward. "Why didn't you tell us about your business?" Mom asked, voice small and bewildered. I smiled, the same polite expression I'd perfected in childhood. "Because you would have asked me to give it to her." The truth hung between us like a third rail. Dad's face went red, then pale. "That's not fair. Isn't it?" I pulled out my phone and showed them Emily's Instagram posts from Prague. $25,000 for cultural enrichment. How much have you spent on my cultural enrichment? They couldn't answer because we all knew the number was zero. "You raised Emily to expect support," I continued calmly. "You raised me to provide it. The system worked perfectly until I decided to stop participating." Mom reached across the table like she might touch my hand, then thought better of it. "We love you both equally." "No, you don't. And that's okay. But don't ask me to pretend anymore." I left $20 on the table for my coffee and walked out. They didn't follow. By August, the consequences had crystallized into something permanent. Without my financial safety net, they'd lost the house to foreclosure. The tax penalties had eaten through their savings. Emily had moved back home, just in time to help pack boxes for their move to a 2-bedroom apartment across town. They still talked to relatives, still tried to control the narrative. But people had seen enough. The whispered conversations at church, the careful questions from neighbors, the awkward silence when Emily's study abroad photos appeared in other people's social media feeds. The truth had a way of spreading without my help. I didn't gloat. I didn't post vindictive updates or share the family group chat screenshots with mutual friends. I simply lived my life openly, honestly, successfully. Let my work speak for itself. Let my boundaries stand firm. They'd taught me that love was conditional, that support was rationed, that my worth was measured by my usefulness to other people. I'd learned the lesson too well for their comfort. I didn't win by fighting back. I won by walking away. By building something they couldn't touch, control, or diminish. By refusing to play a game where I was guaranteed to lose. A year later, I live quietly in my success. My business has grown into something sustainable and respected. My apartment is mine, bought with money I earned through work they never bothered to acknowledge. I don't scream about injustice or post lengthy explanations on social media. I don't need validation from people who never offered it freely. I simply exist fully, finally, without apology. When people ask what happened between me and my family, I tell them the truth without drama or bitterness. They let Emily decide who got support. I accepted their choice and planned accordingly. The rest, I let them figure out for themselves. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop holding up the people who are standing on your shoulders. Sometimes walking away is the only victory that matters.